Hi, I'm Gunter. Probably know that since there's four people in our class. Um, so I'm doing my presentation on an exciting technology. Well, it's not. I was going to say new, but it's not really that new. They started doing this 10 years ago, but it's a technology that reduces the risks of acquiring a disease called the graft versus host disease. Um, Graft versus host disease is not very popular. I doubt anyone's ever heard of it. Mainly because it only acquires to people that have a bone marrow transplant. So essentially, I'll explain a little bit in a minute, but it's an allergy, an allergic reaction that you get to the blood when you do a bone marrow transplant. Um, so there's a company that's come up with a test that basically reduces the risk. But I'll get there in a minute. So, like I said, so graft versus host disease is um, a reaction that bone marrow transplants get um, from their related or unrelated donor. So the graft is the donor, and the host is the person who needs the blood. So when you have some presumably a cancer, leukemia, a blood cancer, um, well, with leukemia you can go through chemotherapy, but if it's a bad leukemia, you will probably need to have a bone marrow transplant. My daughter actually had leukemia when she was a year and a half. She didn't need a bone marrow transplant. She, I guess, was lucky. She had the good leukemia, so she just had chemotherapy. So she didn't have to do bone marrow transplant. And when I say bone marrow transplant, um, you might think, I don't know, well, at least this is what I thought. They drill a hole in your bone, they take the marrow out, they do some stuff. It's not like that anymore. They don't do anything like that. It's literally just a transfusion. So you take this person's blood, and that's your bone marrow transplant. But because everybody knows bone marrow transplant, they just keep the verbiage. Um, so, graft versus host disease has four grades, like four different types, and you you only really get it. You can get it in related pairs, and when I say related donor pairs, it's brother sister is the first line. That's great, um, and then parents, then grandparents, and those would be related, obviously. Um, the unrelated people are when you go to a bone marrow registry, and there's a bunch of them. There's some big ones. Um, that's where you uh, get people that obviously they come and they donate blood, and you probably didn't know it was blood, but now I'm telling you. So they donate blood, and they put it in a registry. And whenever somebody says, "Hey, I need a bone marrow transplant," they cycle through their registry and see what's matching. Uh, the way they do that is most hospitals will only take a 9 or a 10 match. So there's a scale of 1 to 10, and the compatibility that you have with another, your blood is compatible. Let's just say it's the same, 90% to 100%. So your blood, in certain aspects that they label, is 90% the same as Bob's blood. So they'll say that's a 9 out of 10 score. Um, then obviously 10 out of 10, it's a 100% match. This isn't obviously an identical DNA match because that's not possible. But it's a 9 out of 10. And so it's out of these 10 parameters that they look for. So what they do is they say, okay, Bob, you need a donate, or you need bone marrow. we're going to go look through our registry, and here's 5 people that have a 9 and 10 score compatible with your blood. So they'll take those 5 people, and they'll call them. But if you think about it, bone marrow registry's been out forever. Not forever, but let's just say 10 years. Well, whoever put their sample in 10 years ago, they could be dead. They could have moved. They could not be contactable. All kinds of things. So a bunch of people drop off the list immediately. And they're left with, usually they have to have 3. So most hospitals will say, look, we need 3 matches to actually go through with doing the transplant. Because they need the guy, Tom's going to show up, and, he's supposed to be there 8 o'clock in the morning to do this bone marrow transplant for Bob. Well, if Tom gets in a car accident on the way there, Bob still needs his bone marrow, his blood. So they have a backup, and then another backup. So they need 3 people that, live in the area, are in the area at the time, and are on call to basically shoot over and give fresh blood. You have these people that have a 9 or a 10 score, and they are willing to give their blood to you to help fight your cancer or whatever you need a bone marrow transplant for. There's other things that you can get it for besides cancer. I don't remember what they are. And basically, I'm doing this presentation because my daughter had leukemia. And, hold on. So basically, I'm doing this presentation kind of in a selfish way because I'm interested in finding out about bone marrow transplants and how to make them more successful in case my daughter needs to have a bone marrow transplant, because she's more likely to have a bone marrow transplant that since she's already had leukemia, at least more likely than me or you. I don't know about you, but more likely than me, since I've never had leukemia. She's already had it. She did chemotherapy, and once you do chemotherapy once, it's just like anything. Your body gets used to it, and it's not going to be as effective the next time. So she got it at such a young age that her body, if she were to acquire leukemia again, even tomorrow, she would 90% have to have a bone marrow transplant. So I did this research to find out how I can make a bone marrow transplant more successful, and it's through this company called Predictive Biodiagnostics. And this company has basically come up with a test that reduces the likelihood of getting the graft versus host disease. So graft versus host disease is split up into 4 different levels. One being the lowest issue. So when you get a bone marrow transplant, you go to Tom unrelated, even if it's actually related. 70% of the related 70% of the people who need a bone marrow transplant can't find a related party. They don't have a brother or a sister or family that can help them donate blood. So they go to the registry. The registry says, here's your pair, or here's your 5 people that were 9s or 10s. So now you have your 9s or 10s, and what this company does, PBD, they will take the 5 people or the 3, however many people they get, but it has to be at least 3, and they will grab their blood, put it in their computer, in their software, and through their test, and figure out of those, let's just say five, out of those five people that were nines or tens, which one is going to be the most successful in realizing that you don't want graft versus host disease. So they will, and the test, so when the test first started, these scientists went to all the universities, and they said, and all the main bone marrow donors, and there's huge research facilities on this stuff. They went to them and said, look, what is a good percentage on, reduction of having this graft versus host disease? And, long story short, it turns out like 10% would be revolutionary. Like if you could reduce the chances of getting graft versus host disease 10%, it would be amazing. Because right now, they don't suggest bone marrow transplants until you're really bad. Because if the bone marrow transplant, if you acquire graft versus host disease in the level 4, which I'll get to that in a second, I know I was leading that way, but if you get level 4, you're going to die between 2 weeks and 100 days, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. You tried the bone marrow transplant, and it didn't work, and that's what you get. So, level 3, you're better off, and then it gets, your likelihood is better down to level 1. Oh, let me go there. So, level 1 graft versus host disease grade is minimal. Let's just say, I think it's 25%. Let's see, yeah, less than 25% of the affected part of your body. So let's just say you have a rash from here to here, and 25% of this whole affected area is red. That's grade 1. It's not debilitating. You can still live your life. Your immune system's it's a little bit depleted. It's not so bad. You'll function fine. You'll be glad you're alive. 2 is between 25 and 50%. So from here to here, half of the affected area is red. It's worse. I don't want to say you're going to get more sick, but you're just weaker and it's not so great. 3 is actually the worst one, because grade 3 definitely means that you're in trouble. It's over 50% of that area affected. You're not gonna live a very good life. You'll be sick. It's basically like having an allergic reaction all the time, and it can be fatal, but not always. Well, level 4, like I said a minute ago, is completely fatal. It's completely fatal. So this company has developed this test that they can reduce. So they'll grab those 5 people that I was talking about, and they'll say, okay, we ran everybody through our test. We matched them with the host, the person that needs the blood. And number 2 is the best case for you. So the way they figured out the percentage of success is, let's just say they got 10 people. And so 10 people did a test. And number 2 was the one they picked. They said, okay, number 2, you are going to give your blood to the host, and in 120 days, we're going to see if it was a success. Well, they've been able to do it to above 50%. So, which sounds kind of bad, it's like flipping a coin, but it's better than 10%. And remember, 10% was revolutionary. The doctors were like, that would be amazing. So, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing that's come out. And the more exciting part about it is that PBD will be able to expand the bone marrow transplants, because right now you only get a bone marrow transplant if you are going to die right away and you don't mind taking the risk of dying within 2 weeks to 100 days. You're like, you know what? I will take the risk because I'm going to die anyway. So it's pretty exciting because if it's right now it's in trial clinical phase. So they have a bunch of hospitals that are going to be picking candidates to, and you don't have to do anything. It's just blood. So you get 2 vials of blood and you give it to the bone marrow registry. And if you sign up for PBD, you do 1 more vial. So now you do 3 vials of blood. They send 1 vial to PBD, and PBD stores it and is like, okay, we're ready. And the other 2 go to the bone marrow registry. So when the bone marrow registry gets them, they will log it and say, okay, it'll match these guys that are 9 out of 10 in compatibility. So once they have a host that needs blood, they will call PBD and say, look, we got a guy. We're going to send you a bunch of these samples from the bone marrow registry, and you tell us which one's the right one. And they've been able to do it to reduce the likelihood of getting graft versus host disease by 50% or more, really. They just conservatively say 50%. So it's pretty exciting. It's exciting for me as a parent with a child who had leukemia, knowing that the technology's out there so that one day if she were to need a bone marrow transplant, that the chances of her having a successful bone marrow transplant are increased by 50%. So that's my presentation. Let me see if there's anything on here that's exciting. One thing I forgot to mention. So the other exciting thing is that now, if this is so successful, more people will suggest having a bone marrow transplant. So doctors, like I said, doctors won't if they're going to say, oh, you might die in 2 years, they won't suggest a bone marrow transplant because you could die in 2 weeks instead of 2 years. But with this test, they're more likely to suggest more bone marrow transplants, which, gives the people with issues a better quality of life. I just realized I got to pick up my daughter, but that was the end of my presentation anyway. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I am probably sitting right there. Thanks. Bye.